The mailbox creaked open with the same stubborn resistance it always had, its rusty hinge groaning like a tired sigh. Mara almost ignored it. Bills, flyers, and the usual forgotten subscriptions made checking it a pointless routine. But today, nestled between an electricity bill and a crumpled real estate brochure, was a small beige envelope. No stamp, no return address. Just her name, written in blue ink, in handwriting she hadn't seen in 3 years. Her heart stumbled. She stared at it for a moment, feeling the air around her grow still. The handwriting was rounded, neat, slightly slanted to the right, and unmistakably Lily's, down to the little heart drawn above the letter I. Mara's fingers trembled as she held it. The paper was slightly worn at the edges, as if handled repeatedly before being delivered, or perhaps before being sent from wherever it had been waiting. Back inside, she sat at the kitchen table, the silence pressing in. The envelope lay between her palms like a relic, something sacred and impossible. She hadn't dreamed of Lily in months. She hadn't let herself. This wasn't a dream, though it was too solid, too heavy, too wrong. She opened it with slow precision, as if rushing might shatter whatever illusion had brought it here. Inside was a single piece of lined notebook paper, folded twice. Written in that same familiar script were only 12 words. I'm sorry for what I did. I didn't mean to. It wasn't signed, but it didn't need to be. The letters curled in that particular way at the base. The ink smudged slightly where Lily used a press too hard, even the indentation on the paper. Mara ran her finger across it, and it felt like a whisper in the skin. She read it again, and again. The words didn't change, but the feeling in her chest did. Panic, grief, and something colder, dread. What did Lily do that needed apologizing? Why now? And how? Mara clutched the letter as her vision blurred. Her daughter had died 3 years ago, a rainy Friday night, wrapped in red and blue lights and shattered glass. They'd buried her with her favorite notebook, the same kind of paper this was written on. Her hands shook. Her breath came shallow. The walls around her seemed to lean closer, listening. For the first time in years, she whispered her daughter's name. Lily? The name didn't echo, but something shifted in the air, something that made Mara glance toward the hallway, toward the closed bedroom door that hadn't been opened since the funeral. She stood slowly, the letter pressed to her chest like a shield. From behind that door, something creaked, just once, like a footstep on wood. Mara didn't move, and the silence held its breath. Mara stood frozen at the threshold of the hallway, eyes fixed on the closed door at the end. Lily's room. It hadn't been opened in 3 years, not once, not for cleaning, not even during those empty, aching nights when she'd pace the house, desperate for a scent, a memory, a sound. But now, with that letter still clutched to her chest, she couldn't look away from it. The creak hadn't been her imagination. She knew the sound of her daughter's footfall. She had heard it 1,000 times, and just once more, she took a step forward. The hallway stretched longer than it should have. The old floorboards whispered under her feet. That smell, the faint scent of vanilla lotion and the trace of lavender detergent, filled her nostrils. It was impossible. It was her. The doorknob was cold in her hand. Inside, Lily's room was exactly as she'd left it. The posters were still on the wall. A favorite band. A film quote scrawled in silver marker. Polaroids clipped to a string of fairy lights that no longer lit up. A denim jacket hung on the back of the chair, one sleeve slightly torn. The bed was made, though the covers had settled into the shape of a body long gone. The curtains swayed, though the window was shut. Mara didn't speak. She simply walked to the desk and sat. The letter she carried she placed down gently, like setting a bird's feather on water. She stared at the blank notepad resting beneath it, heart thudding. Then she noticed something odd. The pen on the desk, the one Lily always used, purple with a chewed-up cap, had fresh ink on the tip. Mara touched it. It was wet. She picked it up, turned it over. That couldn't be. That pen hadn't moved in 3 years. No one had been in here. Suddenly, a soft, muffled sound echoed down the hallway. A metallic clink, like the mailbox's lid slapping closed. Her breath caught. She hurried to the front door and flung it open. Nothing. The street was empty, the wind still. But inside the mailbox, another envelope waited. No stamp. No return address. Her name, again, in Lily's handwriting. This one was heavier. She opened it slowly, fingers twitching. Inside, the message was longer, but just as cryptic. I keep trying to find you. It's cold here. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I thought he would stop. I didn't know. Mara read the words over and over, her knees weakening beneath her. Thought he would stop? Who? Stop what? The cold air tightened around her like a noose. Her hand closed around the letter, and she turned toward the house. But something flickered in the window of Lily's room. Not movement, a reflection. For the briefest second, Mara saw her, long brown hair, pale skin, green eyes wide and sad, standing there, looking at her, then gone. The curtain swayed, as if someone had just stepped away. The rain had started that night around 8. A soft patter against the windows that grew into a steady roar by midnight. Mara had always hated the rain. It made the house feel too quiet, too fragile, like sound itself had drowned. But that night, the silence was broken by shouting. Her voice, Lily's, the sharp edge of frustration cutting through a home already too thin with grief and misunderstanding. Mara remembered standing in the kitchen, the smell of overcooked pasta burning in the pot, her hands shaking as she clutched the edge of the counter. Lily had stormed in, cheeks flushed, mascara smudged, her backpack slung over one shoulder like a declaration of war. And they'd argued about him, the boy, the one Mara never trusted, the one with the cold smile and eyes that never quite met hers. I'm not a child. Lily had screamed, you don't get to control me. And Mara, exhausted and scared, had said the worst thing a mother could say. Then leave, go, be with him if he's so perfect. She hadn't meant it, but the words had landed like knives. And Lily, trembling, turned on her heel and disappeared into the storm. That was the last time Mara saw her alive. She never forgave herself for that night. For the moment she let anger speak louder than fear. The moment she watched the door close and did nothing. The police said Lily's car skidded off the road just 3 blocks away. A slick turn, a tree, and too much speed. But deep down, Mara always felt something else was wrong. The way the car was found, doors locked, headlights still on, Lily's phone missing. And now this letter. I thought he would stop. I didn't know. Mara sat on the floor of Lily's room, the rain now echoing faintly from the past, and let herself remember, really remember. Lily had come home crying that week. Twice. She said it was school stress, said it was nothing, but she'd flinch when Mara touched her arm, wore long sleeves when it wasn't cold. Mara hadn't seen it, or maybe she had, and chose not to believe what it could mean. The second letter sat beside her, the ink slightly smeared where her tears had fallen. A new sound drew her attention, a soft scratching, not loud, barely audible, but persistent, like a fingernail against wood. It was coming from beneath the bed. Slowly, Mara leaned down. Nothing, but there, barely visible in the shadow, was a notebook. Her breath hitched. It wasn't one she recognized. She pulled it out with trembling fingers. The cover was blue, worn, and on the inside cover, Lily's name was written in the same familiar hand. She flipped through the pages, drawings, thoughts, pieces of poetry, until she landed on one with a corner torn out. Just a few words remained. If something happens, look behind the mirror. Mara's pulse pounded. The mirror? She turned her head slowly toward the vanity. The old mirror was cracked at the corner. Harmless. Decorative. She'd never questioned it. Until now. The mirror had hung on Lily's wall since she was 9. A vintage piece they found together at a flea market, its edges framed with curling brass vines. At the time, Lily had said it looked haunted in a pretty way. Now, Mara couldn't help but feel that childish joke had become prophecy. She stood in front of it, the weight of the torn notebook page still settling into her chest. Looked behind the mirror. The reflection showed a woman unraveling, her own eyes bloodshot, her shoulders slumped under invisible weight. And behind her, Lily's room was still and untouched, a mausoleum disguised as a teenage sanctuary. Mara reached out. Her fingers brushed the glass. Cold, the frame creaked slightly as she nudged it. To her surprise, it wasn't firmly affixed to the wall. With careful hands, she lifted it upward and it slid loose. Behind it wasn't drywall or faded wallpaper. There was a wooden panel, pale, raw, and scratched. No, not scratched. Carved. Her heart nearly stopped. Dozens of words were etched into the wood in shaky, desperate strokes. Some lines repeated. Some were jagged, others faint. She traced a few with her fingers as her lips moved soundlessly. He watches when I sleep. Don't trust him. It wasn't an accident. He said no one would believe me. Each phrase hit like a cold slap. Her vision swam as she took in the full horror of it. Lily had been afraid. Not just sad. Not just angry. Terrified. And she had tried to leave a message. Hidden behind glass, behind memory, behind guilt, Mara backed away from the mirror, the air around her suddenly feeling thicker, like the walls themselves were pressing inward. She turned, but her balance faltered. A noise, barely a whisper, slipped through the room. Mom. She froze. It hadn't been in her head. The voice was faint, childlike, but unmistakably real. It came not from the hallway, not from the door, but from the wall itself, from behind the carved wood. Mara stepped closer again, ear almost pressed to the surface. Lily, she whispered. Nothing. Then another sound, a heartbeat. Not hers, not steady or strong. Faint, fluttering, like a bird caught in a box. She knocked on the wall. Once. The heartbeat stopped. And then, from behind the panel, something knocked back. Mara stumbled away. Her body trembled violently, cold sweat sliding down her back. Logic fled. Fear overtook. Yet still, some part of her, the mother, the woman who had failed her child once already, refused to run. She gathered herself and moved back toward the panel. There had to be a way inside. Her hand brushed the baseboard, and she found it. A slight indentation. A latch. Click. The panel popped loose at the bottom. A narrow, dark crawl space stretched behind it. And from inside, the smell of dust and rot wafted out. But beneath that, a faint trace of something sweeter. Lavender and vanilla. Lily. And just beyond the shadows, something moved. The air that poured from the crawl space was stale and cold, like a forgotten breath held for years. Mara hesitated. The open panel, revealing only pitch-black shadow. But that smell, the soft, unmistakable trace of Lily's perfume, was calling her. She took a flashlight from the hallway drawer, hands trembling, and shone it into the narrow gap. Dust floated like ash. The beam illuminated aged wooden beams and crumbling insulation, but just beyond, the crawl space widened into a room that shouldn't be there. No blueprint had ever shown it. No contractor had mentioned it. Mara had lived in this house for over a decade, yet here it was, hidden, silent, and waiting. She crawled inside, the panel closing softly behind her, as if nudged by unseen hands. The passage felt endless, but soon the tight space opened up, and she found herself kneeling in a chamber just large enough to stand. The flashlight's beam cut through the darkness, revealing walls covered in the same erratic carving seen behind the mirror, but deeper here, more frenzied, as though scratched with fingernails, not tools. He comes when I'm alone. No one hears me. I can't leave. Mara's heart pounded. On the floor lay a thin, tattered mattress, a child stuffed rabbit, and an old cassette player with worn buttons. She stepped closer, hand brushing across the toy. The ear was torn. Lily had once named it Mr. Buttons. A photograph lay near the mattress, faded but intact. Mara picked it up, her breath caught in her throat. It was Lily, younger, maybe 13, standing beside a man. The man's face was scratched out violently, over and over. Only the hand remained, resting possessively on Lily's shoulder. A silver ring on his finger, large and old-fashioned, caught the light of the flashlight. Her stomach dropped. She recognized that ring. It had belonged to David, her ex-husband, Lily's stepfather. Mara stumbled back. The pieces shifted inside her, snapping into a horrifying clarity. The withdrawn behavior, the flinching, the long sleeves, the sudden rebellion, the night of the accident. Lily wasn't running from her mother. She was trying to escape him. And Mara, blind, grieving, guilt-ridden, had missed it all. The cassette player whirred suddenly, making her jump. Her finger had brushed one of the buttons. A soft click, and a voice crackled through the ancient speaker. It was Lily. "Mom, if you find this, I hope you know I tried. I really tried. But he said he'd hurt you if I told. I thought I could handle it. I thought I could wait until I was old enough to leave. I'm sorry I lied. I'm sorry I was scared. I love you." The recording ended with a sob. A long, choked silence. And then a man's voice, distant but clear. "You were told not to speak." A loud bang. And static. Mara dropped the player as if it had burned her. Somewhere behind her, maybe from the panel, maybe from the shadows, she heard it again. That heartbeat. Faster now. Insistent. Mara's hand shook uncontrollably as she backed toward the crawlspace opening, her breath shallow, eyes wide, ears straining for any sign of movement. The heartbeat, soft and rapid, had stopped again, replaced now by an almost imperceptible hum, like a sound beneath the silence. A vibration felt more in the bones and heard by the ears. She gripped the cassette player as if it anchored her to reality, its plastic body now slick with sweat. But reality had already begun to fray. The name she refused to think, the one she tried to bury under years of legal documents, divorce papers, and silent shame, rose like bile in her throat. David, the ring on his hand, the voice in the recording. It was him. It had always been him. But this room, this hidden cell in her house, had never made sense. Who built it? Why was it here? And how had she never known? She shone the flashlight across the walls again. Behind one corner, the light caught on something metallic. Mara stepped forward. It was a hinge, rusted, small, barely visible against the wooden slats. A door? She pressed gently, and the panel groaned open into yet another chamber, even darker than the last. And colder. The air shifted as if something exhaled. Inside, there were photographs pinned across the walls, covering every surface. Some yellowed with time, others fresher. They were all of Lily, walking to school, sitting in the yard, reading in her room, all taken without her knowledge. Mara choked back a scream. In the center of the room was a desk. On it, a collection of trinkets, hair ties, bracelets, the missing pages of the notebook, and, lying on top of a stack of letters, a small velvet box. Her hand trembled as she opened it. Inside was Lily's necklace, the one she wore every day, the one that hadn't been found in the car. Tears stung Mara's eyes. Her knees buckled, and she leaned against the desk for support. But the truth was already pouring into her like a flood. Lily hadn't died because of a car accident. She had been trying to escape David, and he had silenced her before she could. That room wasn't just a prison. It was a shrine, built in secret, beneath her own roof, by a monster she once married, hidden in plain sight. Suddenly, the light flickered. The air grew heavy, electric. From the hallway, beyond the crawl space, Mara heard the front door creak open. Footsteps. Slow. Familiar. No one had a key. Not anymore. The flashlight flickered again, then died. Darkness swallowed the room, and from within it, a whisper close to her ear. "He's back." Darkness enveloped Mara like a suffocating shroud, the cold pressing against her skin as the flashlight's last flicker vanished. Her breath came in shallow gasps, every nerve screaming to run, but she was rooted to the spot. The whisper echoed again, fragile yet filled with dread. "He's back." Footsteps approached, slow and deliberate, scraping against the wooden floor outside the crawl space. Panic surged, but Mara swallowed it hard, forcing herself to think. She couldn't let fear paralyze her. Lily's memory demanded courage. Suddenly, the footsteps stopped. Silence. Then a faint rustle. Her hand found the edge of a dusty envelope on the desk, sealed with a crimson wax stamp, embossed with an unfamiliar symbol. Mara's fingers trembled as she broke the seal and unfolded the letter inside. The paper was thick aged and fragrant with lavender, the same scent that had lingered in the hidden room. Her eyes scanned the words, written in a delicate, careful hand, not Lily's, but someone else's. To the mother who failed to see, to the daughter who cried silently, the truth is deeper than the wounds you've known. Beware the shadows, for they guard their own. Mara's heart thundered. The letter wasn't from Lily. But who? The footsteps resumed, closer now, echoing just beyond the panel. A voice called out softly, almost a whisper. "Mom." Mara's breath caught. Could it be? No. Impossible. She pressed her ear to the doorframe, straining to hear more. Then, the soft creak of the floorboard. A silhouette flickered in the doorway. A woman, young, with long black hair, pale skin, and eyes wide with a haunting mixture of fear and hope. She stepped into the dim light, revealing a thin frame draped in worn clothes, her fingers clutching a torn photograph of Lily. "Mara," the woman said, voice trembling, "I'm sorry it's taken so long, but I'm here now." Shock froze Mara. This stranger, this ghost from the past, held the key to everything. Questions flooded her mind, but before she could speak, the woman continued. "They told me you wouldn't believe, that you'd be scared, but I had to come back. For Lily, for you." Mara swallowed hard. The letter still clutched tightly in her hand. The shadows in the room seemed to lean closer, and the house, her home, whispered secrets it had never dared to reveal. The stranger's eyes glistened in the dim light, a flicker of pain and determination behind them. Mara's mind raced as she struggled to process the woman's words and the weight of the letter still pressed in her hand. Who was this woman? And how had she been hidden in the shadows of her life for so long? "I'm Emma," the woman finally said, voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "Lily's real sister." Mara's breath caught. "Sister? I didn't know. How is that possible?" Emma nodded slowly, stepping deeper into the crawl space. Lily was adopted. Before that, she had another family, a family that was broken by the same man who destroyed ours. David. Mara shook her head in disbelief, memories crashing down, the years of unanswered questions, the silence surrounding Lily's past. "Why didn't anyone tell me?" "Because David wanted to keep the truth buried," Emma whispered. "He controlled everything. But Lily found out. She was trying to protect you and herself." Emma handed Mara a worn, leather-bound journal, its pages yellowed with age. "This is Lily's. It holds everything, her fears, her hopes, her fight." Mara opened it carefully, reading passages filled with trembling handwriting. There were stories of secret meetings, whispered warnings, and pleas for help. The last entries were the most chilling, detailing the night Lily disappeared, her plan to escape David's grasp. Tears streamed down Mara's face as the pieces finally fit together. The hidden room, the carvings, the recordings. Lily had been a prisoner in her own home, silenced by the man who was supposed to protect her. Outside, the sun began to rise, casting light through the cracks in the floorboards. The house seemed to breathe a sigh, as if releasing a long-held breath. Emma looked at Mara with quiet resolve. "We can bring him to justice. Together." Mara nodded, a new strength rising within her. For Lily, for herself, for the truth that refused to be hidden any longer. The journey was just beginning. The morning light filtered through the cracked windows, but Mara felt no warmth. The weight of the night's revelations pressed heavily on her chest as she and Emma sat side by side on the worn wooden floor, the journal between them like a fragile bridge to the past. Each word was a scar reopened, but also a step toward healing. "We need proof," Mara whispered. "Something concrete that the police can't ignore." Emma nodded, her dark eyes sharp with determination. "There's more. The letters, the photos, and the voice recordings I brought with me, all kept hidden. We just have to find the right moment to expose him." But David was no fool. Mara knew his manipulations ran deep. He had built walls of lies around himself, silencing anyone who dared speak against him. The house, once a sanctuary, now felt like a trap, each creak and shadow a reminder of the darkness lurking beneath. As they planned, the atmosphere grew tense. A sudden noise from the hallway made them freeze. Footsteps, slow, deliberate, approaching. Mara's heart hammered. The same footsteps from last night. Emma grabbed Mara's hand, whispering, "Get ready." The door to crawl space creaked open, revealing a tall man with cold eyes, David. His presence sucked the warmth from the room, his gaze fixed on Mara and Emma, like a predator sizing a prey. "You should have stayed silent," he said, voice low and threatening. But Mara's fear dissolved into fierce resolve. This time, she would not be powerless. "This ends now," she said, voice steady. "We have everything. The truth, the proof. Your lies are finished." David's lips twisted into a cruel smile. "You think you can stop me?" Before anyone could react, a sudden noise from outside, the sound of sirens, pierced the air. Emma's voice was barely a whisper. "Help is coming." David's expression faltered, the walls closing in. He backed away, vanishing into the shadows as the police arrived, their flashlights slicing through the darkness. Mara and Emma stood together, trembling but unbroken. The darkness was facing its reckoning. The house felt different in the morning light. Less like a prison, more like a place where healing could begin. The weight of years of silence and fear was lifting, replaced by a fragile hope. Mara stood at the window, watching the sun rise over the neighborhood, the sky painted in soft shades of pink and gold. Emma was beside her, a quiet strength in her presence. Police had taken David into custody, his reign of control finally broken. The evidence, the hidden room, the journals, the recordings, was enough to ensure he could never hurt them again. The nightmare that had haunted Mara's life was unraveling, thread by thread, but the scars remained. Lily's absence was a hollow ache that wouldn't fade overnight. Mara pressed her hand to her chest, feeling the steady beat of her own heart, a reminder of life, resilience, and the fight that had brought her here. Emma broke the silence. "We have a chance now, to rebuild, to tell Lily's story, to make sure no one else suffers in silence." Mara nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. For her, for all of us. Together, they began clearing the hidden rooms, transforming the darkness into light. Photographs were gathered, memories preserved. The house, once a tomb of secrets, was becoming a sanctuary of truth. Outside, neighbors came forward, their faces a mix of sympathy and support. The community that had been blind was waking up, ready to stand beside Mara and Emma. As the sun climbed higher, Mara felt a flicker of peace. The journey ahead was uncertain, but she was no longer alone. The sound of her heartbeat was steady, strong, and full of promise. The past was a shadow, but the future was hers to write.